Hi everyone, in this short little video I just want to talk about different measures of the unemployment rate and why they exist. So in the previous video I just showed you how to calculate different measures of what's going on in the labor force, and we ended up by talking about the official unemployment rate, which the Bureau of Labor Statistics calls U-3 or just U3. And we found out in the United States for March 2013 the official unemployment rate was 7.6%. Well, it turns out there's some very well-known problems with that measure of the unemployment rate. Specifically, it doesn't include what we call discouraged workers and part-time workers, or it doesn't fully account for these two. So what do I mean by discouraged workers? Well, remember, to count as unemployed, you had to, 1, not have a job, and 2, have actively looked for work in the last month. So the way the household survey is conducted, somebody calls up the household, they say, are you employed or not? If they say they're employed, then great, they count as employed. They go into the employment category, they're counted as part of the labor force because they have a job, so by definition they're part of the labor force. Second thing they ask is, well, if you don't have a job, have you actively looked for work in the last month? Well, if the person's actively worked for work in the last month, then they're counted as unemployed, they're part of the unemployment, or the labor force, therefore they count towards the unemployment rate. However, if they answer, no, I have not actively looked for work in the last month, then they're counted as not in the labor force. And if you're not in the labor force, as you recall from the previous video, you're not going to matter for the unemployment rate calculation. Okay? So this can pose a problem in some circumstances. In some circumstances, it doesn't. If somebody's not part of the labor or is not employed and they're not actively searching for work, say because they're a full-time student, then it really doesn't matter if the economy is unable to provide them with a job or if they can't find a job. They don't want a job, so if they don't have one, who really cares? And it could be somebody who's staying at home to raise kids, that could be voluntarily staying home to raise kids, it could be somebody who's just retired, or it could be somebody who has decided that they were going to go to school full-time, or for whatever reason they're just not actively searching for work. Well, think about what happens in the labor market. If you lose your job and you start looking for work and you're looking month after month after month and you're unsuccessful each and every month, eventually you might reach a point where you're discouraged. You become so discouraged, you think there's no jobs out there, so why should I bother looking? At that point, you stop looking for work. Now think of what happens in that household survey. You get called up by the government. They ask you if you have a job, you say no. They ask you if you looked for work in the last month, you say no, which is true because you became so discouraged that you stopped looking for a job. Well, then you're not counted as unemployed, so you don't show up in the official unemployment rate data. Right, so what the government's done is, starting in 1994, they've started collecting information on broader measures of unemployment, one of which is U5, which includes discouraged workers, and another category called marginally attached workers, but we'll just lump it all together and call it discouraged workers. And so through further questions, they're able to identify, is this person somebody who is unemployed because they're going to who don't have a job because they just don't want one, they want to stay home, raise the kids, they want to stay home for whatever reason, or they want to go to school full-time, or is this somebody who's simply given up looking for work due to economic reasons? Okay? Well, in this measure, then we count those people who have given up work, looking for work due to economic reasons, simply they can't find one. We call them discouraged workers, and they get included in the unemployment measure U-5. Okay? And because they're included in unemployment, this measure of the unemployment is going to be larger than the official one. And if you include discouraged workers and that category of marginally attached workers I briefly mentioned, you get the U5 unemployment rate, which is 8.9%, or it was 8.9% in March 2013. So although the official unemployment rate was 7.6, this broader measure of unemployment called a U5, which includes discouraged and marginally attached workers, was 8.9%. Okay? But that doesn't solve all the problems with the unemployment statistic. Okay? If you think back to how the survey is conducted, first question is, hey, do you have a job or not? All right? And if you have a job, you're counted as employed. Well, the basic survey doesn't try to distinguish between people who have part-time jobs and full-time jobs. So if you're employed for even 1 hour during the month, then you're counted as somebody who has a job. Boom, you count as employed, even if you would really prefer to work more hours. So think about it like this. Think there's somebody who's a part-time worker, maybe working 20 or 30 hours a week, who really would prefer to work 40 hours or even more, right? Well, if they're only working 20 hours, but they would prefer to work 40 hours, then in some sense, they're 50% unemployed, right? They would love to work an extra 20 hours, but they can't find anybody or any firm to go ahead and hire them, right? So that person is only half employed. They're not employed as much as they would like, but they are employed. So in the official measure of unemployment, they count as employed. They don't show up in the unemployment statistics at all. Well, this U6 measure of unemployment, which is the U5 measure plus all workers who are working part-time due to economic reasons. So these are workers who work part-time but would really prefer to work more hours. And if you go ahead and take a look at that measure, the unemployment rate in March 2013 was 13.8%. So it was substantially higher than the official unemployment rate, about double. Okay, not quite double, but getting pretty close to double the official unemployment rate measure. So the point to take away from this is the official unemployment rate measure can understate the actual unemployment rate for two reasons. One, it ignores discouraged workers, and two, it assumes everybody is employed full-time, so it basically treats part-time workers as fully employed, even if they would prefer to work more hours. And when you try to take those two things into account, you actually get a much higher unemployment rate of 13.8%. Now, I don't want you to think that this means the official unemployment rate number is useless and that we should ignore it and it gives us no useful information whatsoever. I think what you'll find if you actually take a look at the behavior of these three measures of unemployment over time, they tend to go up and down together. So when the official unemployment rate is rising, i.e. when U3 is rising, the other two measures are rising as well. And when U3 is falling, the other two measures of the unemployment rate tend to fall as well. So I would say that the official unemployment rate measure gives you a good indication of how the labor market's performing from one month to the next. Is it improving or is it not improving? But you have to keep in your mind that the actual unemployment rate is probably higher than the official unemployment rate that gets all the press. All right, that's enough for this unemployment rate video. In the next one, I just want to talk about the job market churn and the different measures of changes in employment in the economy.